8.4, adding and subtracting rational expressions. So if we are adding and subtracting rational expressions, make sure they have like denominators. If the denominators are already alike, then you can simply add the numerator if it says add, or you can subtract the numerator if it says to subtract. So let's try that with a couple. If I have 7 over 4x plus 3 over 4x, my denominators are already the same, so I'm going to add my numerators and simplify. So we have 7 plus 3 over 4x, which is going to give us 7 plus 3 is 10. So we have 10 over 4x. Now it said add the numerators. We've done that. And simplify. So if I have 10 over 4x, both 10 and 4 are even numbers. They can simplify down. So if I divide them both by 2, I will end up with 5 over 2x. And that is my answer. All right, let's look at one that's subtracting. 2x over x plus 6 minus 5 over x plus 6. The denominators are already the same, so I'm going to write it as one big fraction, subtract the numerators, 2x minus 5 over x plus 6. Now there's nothing here I can simplify. I cannot cancel these x's because one's across subtraction, one's across addition. They're not across multiplication, so I cannot simplify that any further. So there's my answer for that one. Now let's look at a few more of these. If I have 8 over 12x minus 5 over 12x, I'm subtracting. My denominators are the same, so I have 8 minus 5 over 12x. 8 minus 5 is 3. If I put that over 12x, I can simplify that because 3 goes into 12 4 times. 3 goes into 3 1 time, so now I have 1 over 4x. So just make sure you simplify correctly. All right, number 2, I'm adding. My denominators are the same, so I'm going to rewrite this as 2 plus 1 all over 3x squared. Then go ahead and add your 2 plus 1, which is going to give me 3 over 3x squared. 3 over 3 will cancel, and that's going to leave me with 1 over x squared. Do not forget that whenever you simplify, you're basically dividing. So 3 divided by 3 is what gives me the 1. Don't just leave it blank there. So make sure you're dividing out properly. All right, another subtraction. X minus 2 is the same on the bottom. So I have on the top 4x minus x over x minus 2. All right, so for this one, on the top, simplify. 4x minus 1x is going to give me 3x. On the bottom, I have x minus 2. And again, I cannot cancel those x's because on the bottom, it's x minus 2. It's not x times something. So there's my answer. All right, last one on this page. We have x squared plus 1 on the denominator on both. We are adding. So we have 2x squared plus 2 over x squared plus 1. On the top, they're not like terms, so I cannot combine them. But I can factor something out to simplify this. So I have a 2 in both of those, a 2x squared and a 2. I can factor out a 2. So now I have 2 times x squared plus 1 over x squared plus 1. So in this case, so 2 is now multiplied by this x squared plus 1, and I have an x squared plus 1 on the bottom. Since it is a cross multiplication, the x squared plus 1s can cancel. And doing that leaves me with just the 2 on the top for my answer. Okay? So now, adding and subtracting with unlike denominators. So if my denominators are not the same, I have to find a common denominator. So if I have A over C plus B over D, then I would simply multiply the first one by d over d, and I would multiply the second one by c over c. So d times a is ad, d times c is cd, plus b times c is bc, d times c is cd. Now they both have common denominators, and I can just add the tops. Same thing with subtraction. Find your common denominator, and then you can subtract. So that may make just a little bit more sense with an actual problem. So right here, find the least common multiple of 4x squared minus 16 and 6x squared minus 24x plus 24. So to do this, we're not adding or subtracting any fractions or anything. We're just working on finding the common denominator, which is the least common multiple. So when I'm doing that, I have to factor each piece completely. So let's work right here with the 4x squared minus 16. First, let's take out the greatest common factor, which is going to be a 4. And when I do that, 4x squared divided by 4 leaves me with x squared. 16 divided by 4 leaves me with 4. So now I have x squared minus 4 in parentheses, and I can use the difference of squares to factor that. So we have 4 times, if this is factored using a difference of squares, I now have x plus 2 and x minus 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. So now, let's look at the second one here. I have 6x squared minus 24x plus 24. Take out the greatest common factor first, which in this case is going to be a 6 because they don't all have x's. When I factor out a 6, I'm left with x squared on the first term minus 24x divided by 6 is 4x, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. Now I'm going to factor this using p and s. So using p and s, I am multiplying to get 4 and adding to get negative 4. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, but 2 plus 2 is positive 4. So I need negative 2 times negative 2. So then I can have negative 2 minus 2. That gives me what I need. So my factors here are going to be 6 times x minus 2 times x minus 2. All right, so back to what we're trying to do here. We are trying to find the least common multiple. So we need to find what all these two terms have in common first. So to do that, I'm going to take this one more step. The 4, I'm going to break down to 2 times 2. And then I have my x plus 2, x minus 2. And on the 6, I'm going to break that down to 2 times 3. And then we have our x minus 2, x minus 2. Everything simplified as much as possible. Now, let's look at what they have in common. So I have a 2 on each of them. So I'm going to highlight that. And they both have an x minus 2. So I'm going to write those things down. So they both have a 2 and an x minus 2. So that's what they have in common. We're just writing that down once. Now, we're going to write down what else is left from the red, which is going to be 2 times x plus 2. And we're going to write down what's left from the blue, 3 times x minus 2. So all of this together is my least common multiple. So I don't want to double the things that they do already have in common. We just write those down once. That's what's in purple. And then we have to write down the leftovers as well. So now let's multiply. And I've got 2 times 2, which is 4, times 3, which is 12. And then I have an x plus 2. And then I have x minus 2, x minus 2. So first we're just going to write those down separately. But since there are 2 of them, we can write that as a square. So I've got 12 x plus 2 times x minus 2 squared. And that is my least common multiple. Okay? So let's do one more of those. We're finding this time the least common multiple of 5x cubed and 10x squared minus 15x. So let's look at 5x cubed first. Let's break that all the way down. 5 doesn't break down, so it's just 5. And then x cubed is x times x times x. All right? Then let's look at 10x squared minus 15x. I can factor out a 5x from that. 10 divided by 5 is 2. X squared divided by x is just x. Minus 15 divided by 5 is 3. And there's no x on that one. So now let's look to see what they have in common. They both have a 5 out front. They both have an x out front. And it looks like that's all they have in common. So we're going to write down what they have in common, 5x. Now, let's look at what's left. There's 2 x's left here, so let's write both of those down. And there's a 2x minus 3 left here, so we're going to write that down as well. Now, let's put it all together. So we have 5, and there's 1, 2, 3 x's, so x cubed times 2x minus 3. There's our least common multiple. All right, so now let's work on finding the sum of two fractions that do not have the same denominator. So first off, let's write this down as 7 over, instead of 9x squared, I'm going to write that as 3 times x times x plus x over, and let's factor this one. We can factor out a 3x, and we're left with x plus 1. So we are needing to find a common denominator. Look and see what they have in common. They both have a 3x. So we need to look at finding our common denominator, figure out what we need to multiply by. Well, I have an extra 3x on the left that the right needs, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the extra. And on the red fraction, it has an x plus 1 that the blue fraction does not have, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by x plus 1. Okay, so that's going to give us our least common multiple, or our common denominator. But we have to multiply the top and the bottom of the fraction by that same thing. So now, my blue fraction is going to be 7 times x plus 1. And I'm going to go ahead and add the x times 3x and put it over one big fraction. So 3 times 3 is going to take me back to my 9. X times x is going to take me back to my x squared, and then the x plus 1. So I don't need everything doubled. I just need to see what all I'm missing from each side. Now, go ahead and simplify the top of that fraction. So 7 times x is 7x. 7 times 1 is 7, so 7x plus 7, plus x times 3x is 3x squared, over, and then we have our 9x squared times x plus 1. We're just going to leave that there for right now. Now the last thing that we're going to do is to rearrange the top and so that it's in order. So we have 3x squared plus 7x plus 7 over 9x squared times x plus 1. Now, you may want to take my word for it, or you can try it on your own if you'd like, but the top of that is not going to simplify. So we're going to leave it just like that. Now let's find a difference now. We just found the sum. Let's find the difference. So on the first fraction, I have x plus 2 over, I'm going to go ahead and factor that denominator, take out a 2, and I'm left with x minus 1, so 2 times x minus 1, minus, and then on the top of this one, I have negative 2x minus 1 over, Let's factor this using P and S. Multiply to get 3, add to get negative 4. So it looks to me like that's going to be negative 3 times negative 1. So I have negative 3 minus 1. When I factor that, I will have x minus 3 and x minus 1. Looking to see what they have in common, they both have an x minus 1. So the extra that they need, this blue fraction needs an x minus 3 on top and bottom, and the red fraction needs a 2 on the top and bottom, so that I have a common denominator for both. So on the top of the left one, I have x minus 3 times x plus 2. I'm going to go ahead and write this down, but be very, very careful, because I have a minus right there, and that means everything's going to change on my signs. So I'm going to put that red fraction in a bracket. So I've got negative 2x minus 1 times 2. That's going to help me to remember that I need to distribute that negative in a little bit. On the denominator, I'm going to pull the 2 out front, and then I have x minus 3 times x minus 1. All right, so now let's simplify the top of that sum. Before we multiply this out right here, well, we can go ahead and multiply that out. That's not a big deal. So let's do that. Let's multiply. We'll do it over to the side. X minus 3 times x plus 2. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. X times 2 is 2x. And negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. So we'll go ahead and write that down. That's going to be x squared. Negative 3 and positive 2 gives me negative x minus 6. Now, let's distribute. We can't distribute yet. I said let's distribute, but we can't, because we have a 2. So let's distribute, but we're going to distribute the 2. So 2 times negative 2x is negative 4x. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Over 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 1. All right. Now we can distribute our negatives. So we have x squared minus x minus 6. And when we distribute that negative, negative times negative 4x is going to be positive 4x. Negative times negative 2 is positive 2. Over, so right now let's just leave this as 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 1. Simplify your top. We have an x squared. We have a negative x and a 4x, which is going to give us positive 3x. We have a negative 6 and a positive 2 is going to give us a negative 4. And on the bottom, we have 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 1. So to see if this is going to simplify it all, let's go ahead and factor the top. I know there's a lot going on here, but if we factor the top, we're trying to multiply to get negative 4 and add to get positive 3. So if I get 4 times negative 1, that's negative 4. 4 minus 1 is 3, so that will factor. So let's see, we have x plus 4 and x minus 1 over, this is why we haven't multiplied out the bottom yet, 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 1. Now, these x minus 1's cancel, and we're left with x plus 4 over, we can go ahead and distribute that, 2x minus 6. And there you go.